one sunny, hot day at Lackland Air Force Base, while drilling basic trainees, a military training instructor, an MTI for those in the know, yelled, "Forward, march." His entire squad began to move, all except one basic. He remained at attention, standing right where he was, staring straight ahead. So the MTI walked up to this basic, got in his left ear, and shouted, "Is this thing working?" "Sir, yes, sir," the basic replied. He wandered around to the right ear. He yelled, "Is this thing working?" And the basic replied, "Sir, yes, sir." And the MTI looked him straight in the face, about 1 inch away, for those who know how MTIs work, and said, "Then why didn't you march when I gave the order?" And the basic replied, without missing a beat, "Sir, I didn't hear you call my name, sir." All right. I think we're all a little like that basic trainee, waiting for God to call us, to give us our spiritual calling. But the thing is, Jesus' commission at his ascension to his disciples was a general order. That's right, it was a general order. So it had everyone's name on it. You didn't have to be specifically called. And there's no doubt when the man in charge says, "Go, make disciples, and teach," we all better get a move on, and pretty quickly. At JBSA-Lackland, we understand discipline. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to us that Jesus challenges us to live out some serious spiritual discipline too. Even so, Christ expects us to move in 3 directions at once. 3 directions: upwards, inwards, and outwards. It's actually pretty simple, but it can be pretty difficult too. But our faith life is like that, isn't it? I mean, it's never just one thing at a time. It takes effort. Sure, looking up is the easy part. Along with the apostles, our eyes move naturally up to the heavens, where Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father. But we tend to think of Jesus' ascension as the finishing touch in the resurrection story. We say, case closed, MC, mission complete. We believe that Jesus began his mission when he took on our human form and became one of us, walking in our footsteps, experiencing our fears, feeling our pains, taking on our weaknesses and foibles to the point of coming face to face with death itself. Just when death seemed to have the last laugh, though, the Father had the last word. And death gave up its grip on Jesus' lifeless body, and he burst forth from the tomb. And after 40 days, he returned to the Father, where he now intercedes for us. But that's really not the whole story, is it? Well, no, it isn't. And we first see why by looking inward. St. Augustine once said in a homily, "Christ ascended before the apostles' eyes, and they turned back grieving, only to find him in their hearts." And St. Paul, in today's second reading from the Ephesians, speaks of looking with the eyes of our hearts, coming to see Christ living within us in faith, and realizing the ways God's grace is working within all of us right now. Coming to new hope, as Paul says, the surpassing greatness of God's power for us who believe. My point here is that only our hearts are able to see through our pain and suffering faintly the work of a mysterious but loving God. I think that only the heart can make sense out of the world's unfairness and injustice we otherwise can't figure out rationally. So God's grace then moves us to look outwards, because it's not only about meeting Christ who lives within us, it's also about sharing with others on a day-to-day basis. Jesus commanded his disciples to go make disciples of all nations. He orders us to do the same. We don't have the luxury of just staring up at heaven with our hands in our pockets and our mouths open, any more than the disciples did. There's work to be done, a world to be transformed, a gospel to be preached. And like it or not, we are the preachers. You and I are the preachers. So the Ascension reminds us that as Christians we're called not only to look outwards, but to move outwards, to get out of our comfort zone and plant gospel seeds in the ground of this world, soil that is, to say the least, unfriendly, right, or painfully indifferent, and you might have found that out for yourselves. We're called to go places where we're not welcome, to proclaim the good news that doesn't always sound very pleasant to those around us, at least not to the short attention span culture we live in, and that one that often confuses freedom with license, views suffering as meaningless, and values life only when it brings immediate pleasure. So in a practical sense, Ascension calls us to execute God's gospel throughout our daily life, preaching it by the love we share, positions we take, and serving those in need, maybe even working for a more just society. St. Francis of Assisi is rumored to have said, "Preach the gospel at all times. Use words only if necessary." And I think that makes for a pretty good basic operations order for us. In the final analysis, we simply can't waste time for Jesus to call our names. We've got to move out right now. We've got to show Christ to the world by our words and by our conduct. And stay tuned, because we hear next week at Pentecost Sunday that God gives us the tools to do this job, that is the Holy Spirit, to not only pray as if we're already in heaven, but to effectively fight the good fight here on earth. So, to wrap up, Christ's ascension wasn't the end of the story. That's not the terminus of the story. Instead, it's the next phase in God's strategic plan, using each of us to help further prepare the world's spiritual battle space, to use a military term. So that said, I suggest our response to the Lord's command should be a resounding, "Sir, yes, sir." Can I hear from everyone?
Sir, yes, sir.